Turn now to the book of Genesis, chapter 37, for our Old Testament lesson this morning, and I will be sharing from the Message this morning. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said, "Listen to this dream I had. We were all out in the field gathering bundles of wheat. All of a sudden, my bundle stood straight up, and your bundles circled around it and bowed down to mine." His brother said, "So, you're going to rule us? You're going to boss us around?" And they hated him more than ever because of his dreams and the way he talked. He had another dream and told this one also to his brothers. "I dreamed another dream. The sun and moon and 11 stars bowed down to me." When he told it to his father and brothers, his father reprimanded him. "What's with all this dreaming? Am I and your mother and your brothers all supposed to bow down to you?" Now his brothers were really jealous, but his father brooded over the whole business. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
You know, dreams are funny sometimes. Because I kid you not, just last night I dreamed that Michael Jordan and I played a game of 2-on-2 basketball against my brother and current NBA All-Star Russell Westbrook. And of course, my team won, and I scored the most points. Here are another couple of funny dreams that I found with a quick Google search. One woman named Marissa shared that one of her most memorable dreams involved being chased by velociraptors in tutus and football helmets through a grocery store, all while she had to balance a teacup on her head. And for a little patriotic twist, a girl named Lucy remembers a dream in which she turned on her bedroom light to see Bruce Springsteen, complete with a USA-themed outfit, going through her sock drawer and stealing all her best socks. Now, when she actually did wake up, she went over to check her drawer just in case. There are different kinds of dreams. Our minds have a way of sorting through the events of the day while we sleep, and we end up with wild results like these sometimes. Perhaps you can remember a dream of your own that is just cartoonish in its silliness. But sometimes dreams are troubling as they churn up emotions and people and places that we thought we had swept under the rug or moved on from. And still other times, dreams are reflections of the future as we catch a glimmer of there and then in the not quite here and now. Those are the kind that we remember the best, I think. They're the ones that startle us. There are dreams that are so vivid, so impactful and important that they are imprinted on our minds and even become rooted in our hearts. I'm talking about the kinds of dreams that inspire us. Silly, dramatic, upsetting, or fortuitous dreams can be powerful and life-changing. There's a man named Jacob whose life was changed once by a vision and promise from God in the middle of the night. And that happened to him in Genesis 28. And a few chapters later, a relative of his named Laban had received guidance from God in his dreams. And now here we are in Genesis 37 with Joseph. So maybe it was a family thing. But even as dreams can be life-changing, they are so startling and provocative and shocking sometimes. "What's with all this dreaming?" Jacob says, one dreamer to another. "Are we supposed to bow down to you?" We can imagine Jacob stone-faced and brooding after dinner, his silent scowl and unmistakable rejection of Joseph's dreams. But Jacob's limp reminds him all too well of the ways that God will reach us sometimes. And Jacob's brothers are even worse. Joseph's brothers are even worse, as they go from brooding to plotting to betraying and selling. Here comes this dreamer, they say. Let's kill him and throw him in a pit, and then we will see what becomes of his dreams. If you haven't already noticed, dreamers are rarely well received. Because quite often, dreams can be provocative and don't sit well with us at first. They are uncomfortable and overwhelming in their grandeur because they are born of desperation and demand that circumstances change. I think that's when our greatest dreams emerge, on the precipice of a turning point. And so it was for Joseph, who is dreaming and antagonizing in one conversation, and just a few paragraphs later, he ends up sold into slavery and bound for Egypt. It was just a few Saturdays ago that I joined the crowd of people over at the football field for graduation ceremonies to celebrate the class of 2018. And among the musical choices for the evening was John Lennon's masterpiece solo, Imagine. Written in the heat of war in Vietnam, the song decries religion, nationalism, materialism, and quite radically challenges the status quo down to its foundations. And I'll admit that there's some elements of the song that make me uncomfortable, so it's not my favorite song, but I appreciate it because it challenges those notions. And I would even guess that there are a multitude of reactions in the sanctuary today that this sermon's title borrows from the song's chorus. So I couldn't help but think of this song when I read through the passage for today, because Joseph is quite the dreamer, but he's not the only one. Over the course of the past few weeks and in those to come, we have revisited how we are a broad family of God that goes back thousands of years and runs the gamut of different nationalities, ethnicities, political allegiances, men and women, strangers and friends, faithful followers, and skeptics looking on from afar. We're quite the quirky collection, but we're a family of God and a people of faith nonetheless. And I think if there's one thing we all have in common, it is the simple fact that we are a family of dreamers. So yes, you may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And neither are you. Neither was Joseph. Before Joseph, there was Noah, who dreamed of a world where people would be more faithful. There was Abraham, who dreamed of a new land of promise. There was Jacob, who dreamed of angels and ladders and wrestled with God, ultimately limping away with a new name and a new vision for life. And then there was Joseph, whose dreams landed him in a pit and sold into slavery in Egypt. But if you know the end of the story, that's not where his story ends. He ends up redeeming his brothers at the very end of Genesis. And so the dreaming doesn't stop with Joseph. It continues through the great leaders of the Old Testament, some of whom we will meet or be reintroduced to in the next few weeks. The dream continued through Moses, who dreamed of liberation. The dream continued through leaders like Joshua and Caleb, Ruth and Esther, and judges like Deborah and Gideon, Samson and Samuel. And then there were a few prophets who caught God's dream for Israel in Jeremiah, Isaiah, Amos, and Micah, until finally God's dream to show us the way home was made into the truest reality by living, working, walking, sweating, and eventually dying among us through Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus shared with us a dream where he envisioned a new community, a new kingdom where God would reign, where prisoners would go free, where the blind would see, where the hungry would be filled, where the meek would inherit the earth. And I think this is the vision, the dream that God still has for the world. A dream that only comes into reality through the power, the presence, the persistence, and the pursuit of God's justice. I think we are a family called to join in the work for justice. And at our best, we're a country that exemplifies that. In this week of national celebration, we pause to remember the dream of the United States and recommit ourselves to many of the ideals that have shaped this country from its founding. In a town with numerous ties to United States history, I'm sure that we all need a little reminder of the dreams that have driven us forward together. After all, it was a 46-year-old merchant who represented our town and state as he was elected to the Continental Congress in 1774, firmly committed to the dream of a more just nation that was free from tyranny. Because it was just a few blocks down the street that Joseph Hughes dreamed of what it might be like to live in a country where people collectively decided the future for themselves. And now his signature is emblazoned forever on our founding decree to be free, the document that we celebrate with fireworks and hot dogs in just a few days, the Declaration of Independence. And less than a century later, another dreamer from Edenton declared her own independence, even breaking the law to do so. Harriet Jacobs believed in the dream of a more just nation free from slavery. And so in 1835, this courageous woman dared to escape and lived in a crawl space above a porch built by her grandmother and uncle. And this space was just 9 feet long and 7 feet wide, and its sloping ceiling was only 3 feet high at one end, so it didn't allow her to turn over while laying down without hitting her shoulder. There were rats and mice that crawled over her as she hid there. There was no light and no ventilation, but still she dreamed of greater freedom, living in those conditions for 7 years until she made a secret journey north in 1842. And she continued her work as an abolitionist in New York and in Rochester, and eventually wrote her groundbreaking autobiography, A Declaration of Independence in its own right. Harriet Jacobs was a dreamer who dared to live free, even when most people said that she couldn't be. The list of great American dreamers is as long and as proud as our history, from the founding fathers to the Wright brothers, Susan B. Anthony, Martin Luther King Jr., and dozens of other pioneers, artists, inventors, and educators. One of the great minds in American history belonged to one of our greatest dreamers. All our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them, said Walt Disney. Walt Disney reminds us that we have within us the courage to change the world and to change our church and to become a more just people if only we have the courage to pursue those dreams. And so from Joseph and Jesus to Harriet Jacobs and John Lennon, dreamers are rarely well received. Dreams demand that we look at what is and imagine something better. That requires change. That requires courage. Dreams are often difficult, and those who have them frequently find themselves rejected because we don't always understand them or know what to do with them. But even with that in mind, I want to challenge you today to dream of who we can be. Not anyone else, just us. Who can we be as Edenton Baptist Church? And as you consider that question, I hope that you will remember that dreams are not just ethereal, shapeless visions. Dreams become reality by your courage to do something about them. So dream of who we can be as a church by living into who you can be as a disciple of Jesus and as a member of this community of faith. Because each one of you is important and necessary to forging the future of Edenton Baptist Church. We are a family of dreamers. We're a country of dreamers. And we're a church of dreamers. And if a better country is built through the justice-driven efforts and visions of committed individuals, then the church should expect nothing less. I'll close today with another quote from one of our best loved Americans. In his second inaugural address, Abraham Lincoln challenged us to work for peace, even in the midst of war. And his words are a challenge for us still today as well. Lincoln said, "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations." May that be so for us as individuals, as a country, and as a courageous people of faith who recommit ourselves to God's dream of justice for the world. Amen.